Gaydon, and it is the Centenary launch event of MG today, and we've got a very special car here. It is the Bonneville X15 ZTT estate car, world record holder, and we have the owner of the car here, Jonathan Suckling. Hi, Jonathan.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Tim. Hi.
Lovely car. It's just started up,
Yeah.
which was quite spectacular.
Yeah, it's probably the first time we've started it up in a couple of years or so, because there's quite a sequence involved. The engine itself was a one-off application built by Roush, so it was completely unique, built for Bonneville, and it's basically a 6-litre V8 aluminium Ford block, but the bottom end is a Roush NASCAR engine, but the top end is a Panos LMP1 Le Mans prototype Class 1 top end, as you can see with the carbon fibre manifold, etc. Slide injection, so it's naturally aspirated, and it's currently knocking out about 800 horsepower.
That's quite impressive, isn't it? Was this what the spec it would have been in for the world record attempts?
When MG ran it, it was about 765. We had it remapped and knocked it up to 800. It redlines at 9.5, but we shifted it at 9,250 as that was the peak of the torque band, and then we knocked it down 50 RPM going through the gears. It's got a Jericho gearbox, which is a NASCAR gearbox with 5-speed non-synchro dogleg first, so once it's in that first gear you're not getting it out until the car hits 100 miles an hour. And when we actually drove the car, it's pushed up to about 40-45 miles an hour, and then so you're holding it at 4,000 revs, pushed up to 45 miles an hour, and then when you hit that point you let out the clutch very gently so you don't get any wheel speed and squander speed, and you drive off the board and away you go. So you're doing about, hopefully if everything's going to plan, 223 miles an hour by the 2 mile, then it takes another mile to creep up to 224, then another mile to creep up to 225.
Yeah, so relatively slow but at a fast speed. I mean, what was the world record that this got? What speed was that?
It was actually it held the C gas coupe record. C is refers to the engine side. Gas actually refers to the fuel. Americans obviously call petrol gas, and there's the old saying out of Bonneville. They have 3 classes: gas, alcohol, and nitro, basically TNT. And there's a sort of hierarchy out there. And as I say, gas is for washing parts, alcohol's for drinking, and nitro for race cars.
Yeah, fair enough.
And coupe refers to the body style, which is standard. So that it broke that. But in addition, it was actually the world's fastest estate car. MG were just about to apply to the Guinness Book of Records for that, and I think it was basically all sorted out. And then sadly, of course, went into liquidation. So that was never formalised.
Which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an unusual car for MG to get involved with as a major manufacturer, I would think, at the time.
Very much so.
I mean, who were the designers of this?
It was all down to Peter Stevens, as probably everybody knows, was the designer, stylist of the McLaren F1, designed and Le Mans winning cars, the BMW Formula 1 cars. Yeah. He was very much a hot rodder, as well as a car designer. If you go to Peter's workshop, you'll be surprised. There's very little evidence of the McLaren F1, but a lot of evidence of hot rod
stuff.
Yeah. So they were launching this car, the V8 car, into the North American market. So it seemed logical, certainly to go and break a record at Bonneville. Absolutely.
Publicity
going
on.
And again, compared with the budget of, say, someone like BMW launching a new model, it was a very relatively modest way of doing it.
Yeah.
It still cost several, a big 7-figure chunk of money, but petty cash compared with BMW's budget.
Yeah. So, I always felt they didn't make enough publicity out of it at the time.
I think it was really just because of what was happening with MG,
and was on its last leg,
very sadly, it certainly should have done. And the car really, I mean, it was very odd that it ended up in private hands. I mean, it never would have ended up in private hands. It would have ended up where it is actually at the on view at the moment in the museum. It was just obviously circumstances dictated what happened. So
sold everything off, didn't they, at the end?
So
at least it's going to stay here for a temporary period.
It's going to be here for a few months on display with the other MG record breakers with the streamliners.
So we've got the X255 in there,
absolutely.
which is the MGF/TF.
Yeah. And
and you had some involvement with the EXF, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. A friend and I, Daniel Nash, we actually bought this and the EXF as well. So say I own this, he owns the EXF, and interestingly, we actually ran EXF on biofuel, on bioethanol, and that was back in 2007. And back then, nobody showed any interest in it whatsoever. But this car was a high-speed taxi run, doing 3 or 4 runs at 225 a day, literally 7 days a week without breaking a sweat. But that other car was very complex, very difficult to run. That was why Peter Stevens said, we're not going to build this car here, we're going to have it built by SoCal Speed Shop, because they've been building cars, breaking records at Bonneville since the late 40s, and the first streamliner they built back in the early 50s was actually modelled on Goldie Gardner's car, right down to the lightning flash on the side. So that's a nice touch. Yeah, so there's a nice link there.
Okay, let's get back to this one. So it's an ordinary estate car. Shall we have a look inside?
Yeah. Okay. Right, shall I go around the other side, Tim?
For this. So we'll both go around there.
As you can see just here, the car is basically one huge cage. It starts here. You've got a solid carbon fibre engine mount. Those exhausts glow cherry red very, very quickly, which is why they're wrapped and produce a huge amount of heat. That's why we had to stop on the start-up just now, because we were about to set fire to the ground sheet.
I did see some smoke coming up from down there, which I thought was a bit dodgy. So, what do we got in here?
I mean,
it's an ordinary estate car that it takes shopping down Tesco's, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the guys in SoCal did actually. One evening, they all piled in it and went down the In-N-Out burger. But the brief was to try and keep the car as standard looking as possible. But as you can see, obviously there's the huge cage which runs throughout the car, beautifully built, trim around the dashboard, leather trim here. Even the racing bucket seats, the Kirky aluminium seats, were retrimmed in MG material. Jericho 5-speed box. Couple of huge idiot lights there for water temperature and oil pressure. Those three there, there's a 3-bottle fire system. I'll show you that in a minute. 2 outputs under the bonnet, and the second output down there, so to douse the driver. The screen there is the Pi data system. At the time, that was actually state-of-the-art, same system they had in Formula 1 cars. Obviously a huge TAC.
Just remind us of what year this was then.
This was 2002 this car was built. So at the time, everything was
state. 20 years?
Yeah, 20 years old now. This is the car's 20th anniversary. So at the time, SoCal were basically told, we want the best of everything, and if necessary, buy 2. There was no limit on the budget. Very precise rev counter there. So it has a 9,500 rev line. But we shifted at 9,250 in first gear and then dropped it down just 50 revs through each gear to keep the car on the peak of the torque band.
Amazing.
So you had to be, every run had to be perfect to get the speed. One slip.
I'm just surprised you've still got things like an armrest.
That was deliberate. That's what tricks people. They think it's just a standard saloon with a big engine, but of course it's not in the slightest.
Far from that.
No.
Yeah, but just look at it. It's got the standard dashboard underneath here, and armrest, and in the back we've got.
And then these just show you these roof rails here. They add great stability on the long course. So they may not look much, but they are actually
do with the airflow over the top.
And then in the back here. You've got your 3-bottle fire system, 2 for the engine compartment, 1 for the driver. You can also see the car has a huge amount of extra weight. There's huge, great steel plates.
Pretty chunky, aren't they?
There's great
steel plates underneath.
Steel plates welded in. You can see that big lead weight bolted in there. There's other lead weights bolted in here, there, and everywhere. There's a water tank under the back seat to give it more weight, because unlike circuit racing, you actually need the weight literally to stop the car taking off, because the air can get under it. So it's to try and keep the thing planted.
Do that.
Yeah. But again,
because there's no big spoilers or anything like that.
There's that little lip. Although that really should go, because that's probably costing us a little bit of speed. But that was one thing we would have done.
But so your downforce then is largely by putting extra weight in.
You need to keep the car. Everything at Bonneville is different to circuit racing. So you want the weight in the car, and when things go wrong, you do not lift off. You have to keep your foot planted, which is so when something goes wrong, you are fighting every instinct and doing exactly what you shouldn't be doing. But the last thing you would want to be doing is lifting off, because with 700 pounds,
you've obviously driven the car so
many times. Yeah.
I mean, what does it actually feel like in there? Can you describe it?
Not really. It's
an out of this world
with this particular. The car. The misconception with Bonneville is that you're driving in a straight line. You're not. The car never points in a straight line. It's one. You're literally. It's one big tank slapper, basically.
Right.
It's this at that speed. This car was absolutely on and over the limit at most times. I would say, control would be an illusion, really. You sit with your elbows braced against your body like that and hold the wheel at the bottom, and just moving the wheel a millimetre will make the car move 10-20 feet across one way or the other, because the salt is flat, slippery. It's like driving on ice, basically. So the car is literally skating down there. Every gear change has to be perfect. You're a little bit too quick and you'll squander speed in wheel spin, or worse, it'll swap ends. So it was a very, very good car to drive, beautifully engineered. So we made the most number of runs in Speed Week in 2008. It really was a high-speed taxi. We were literally running, bringing the car back, prepping it in line, then running it again like a.
So you ran it. How many years did you run?
2 years, 2007, 2008, and we ran it at 4 events.
Right.
But at Speed Week in 2008, we were doing 3-4 runs a day, and that was 7 days. So a lot of came back here, and it's just been sitting in storage and then my garage at home.
All those years.
Well, I've just been concentrating on other things, and
until now.
Yeah, and I've been racing other things at Bonneville and stuff. So that it opened up. It opened up a whole new world, basically. So a whole extraordinary series of adventures.
It's great that it's appeared again.
Yeah.
After all this time.
It's nice.
We're actually seeing it at the Centenary event here today.
It's
kind of a debut for it, isn't it?
It is really, because it's never really been seen in public. We had it.
That much at all.
We had it when before we went to Bonneville in 2007. It was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed on the cricket pitch with the land speed car displayed next. But both cars were flanking Diesel Max, and that was where we met our parachute consultant Andy Green. But other than that, it's just been tucked away.
Talking about that, we have that on the boot.
Yeah, if you look inside, there you can. I can just come around. Have a look here. Yeah, there's your 3. Those are the 3 fire system pulls, and those are the parachute handles. Those 2 handles there. Yeah, right. You actually only pull 1.
Okay.
You're not supposed to pull 2 at the same time, but if you pull,
what happens if you pull 2 at the same time?
Well, I did actually find out. If you pull 1, the car will stop in about half a mile and sort of glide to a fairly gentle halt. And if you pull 2, because I had a parachute failure, well, the first one didn't open, I pulled the second, the reserve, and both came out at once. The car literally stopped at about 50 feet. I stretched the belts and I cracked the windscreen with my head. So.
So say they're effective.
Very, very. Literally stands on its nose.
They're just mounted on the back of the tailgate, aren't they?
There's obviously a big plate on the back there.
I was going to say, how strong is that?
Well, this actually comes down.
Pull the tailgate off.
Well, this goes on the back here. This is the push bar. It goes in there like that, and that locks the tailgate into place.
Into that position.
And when you're pushed off the start, obviously the push truck has a big plate at the front here, comes up to that, and that's what it pushes you on. So we were pushed, as I said to you, we pushed it up to about 40-45 miles an hour.
Okay.
Away it went. And then dry sumps. Yep, battery box, obviously fuel tank underneath, and that's the dry sump system.
Okay.
So and an awful lot of air-equipped hosing.
Yeah, quite a lot of that.
Yeah. But and as you can see again, the cage just comes all the way through the car, ties it all together.
Right. Yeah. So plans for the future then? It's going to stay
it's going to be here for a while, and but I did actually have a fully funded sponsorship deal to take it back a couple of years ago, and spoke to Peter. He redesigned the aero, so we had new front and rear spoiler design. A friend in the States, very close contacts with Roush. We spoke to them, so we reckon we could have bumped it up to 1,000 horsepower. But if we'd done that, it obviously would have made completely change in the top end of the engine. We would have had to cut the cage up quite considerably to make it meet modern safety regs. Lots changed in 20 years. So yeah, it's probably just as well we didn't, because right now the car is exactly as it ran when the factory ran it. It's escaped that period that old race cars drop into when they're butchered to go a bit faster by enthusiastic amateurs like myself. So it is exactly as it was, right down to the stickers, everything. It is completely untouched.
I gotta say, it is fantastic to see it here, attracting a lot of attention from people this morning.
I was quite,
it is a car that disappeared really off the radar. It's a major car in MG history, but it just really disappeared when the company went bust. And as did several others that disappeared at the same time, really. But it's nice to get it back. It's nice to get it back in here. We've got EX255 in here, which was the follow-up to the EXF. So hopefully this is going to be sort of next to it in there.
It has been, yes, it's been in the Record Breaker Hall next to the Ken Miles and the Goldie Garden of the Sterling Moss cars, it's going back in there this afternoon. Great. And it'll be there for several months.
Well, if anyone wants to come and see it, come down to the British Motor Museum at Gaydon and you'll see this car on display. We're not sure for how long, but a few months yet though.
It's a nice home.
Yeah, lovely.
It's where it should be.
Thanks, Jonathan, for showing us around.
Thanks very much.